This is Ryan Buckner with Schellman. Return on investment, perhaps one of the most commonly used phrases in corporate America, but what does it mean exactly, particularly for organizations in the audit and compliance world when they consider the investments or the expenses necessary to achieve their compliance objectives? What should they look for with respect to those returns? Well, in this installment of the Truth Series, I'm joined with a very special friend and colleague and mentor, the firm-wide managing partner, Doug Barbin. Doug, thanks so much for joining me.
Pleasure, sir.
Okay, so the Truth Series. We're going to get to the bottom of some commonly used phrases here. In this case, we're going to focus in on return on investments. So I've got a couple of questions here.
Okay.
Some fair, some not so fair. But let's start with the whole idea of return on investment. I mean, that can mean different things to different people, but oftentimes I find it when somebody's trying to sell me something, they always tell me what the return on that investment would be. What does return on investment mean in the audit and compliance world?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you and I are both CPAs, so we know the traditional definition of ROI, right? You get a return for some investment that you make in a stock or a business.
That's right.
Or a house or anything from that perspective. Yeah, in our world, it's a little bit, it's a little bit different, but people still expect a return on any investment that they're looking to make. The concept of return on security investment is one that's been floated out for probably a couple decades, and it's been debated a bit because when you talk about security, you're largely talking about safety and peace of mind and protection from bad things that happen. You're really talking about minimizing loss and minimizing damage. But there are investments, and in particular, we want to shift and talk about compliance and return on assessments and audit investments, right? So I think it comes down to understanding, okay, you're going to spend a certain amount of money to build up a program and to maintain a program. What are you going to get as a return for that? What's the benefit to the business to be? And I think that's a perfectly valid conversation to have.
That's right.
And one that people should have when they're thinking about what they need to do to participate in certain markets or to work with certain customers be able to do that. That's in essence where the return is gonna come from.
You've been doing this well over 20 years. In your experience, do you find that many organizations view it as an investment or more as an expense, just a cost of doing business with respect to satisfying an audit or compliance or a certification effort?
I mean, I think generally speaking, mentally, most would consider compliance an expense.
That's right.
That you have to do. We don't exactly live in a business where it is nice to work with clients that are proactive and want to create compliance programs and security programs as a competitive differentiator. But we know in many cases you have to. Regulations force you in healthcare and federal and other spaces to do certain things. And so I think from that perspective, it's considered an expense. But the investment really is that compliance is what allows you to play in those markets.
That's right.
You're an IT service provider, you're a cloud computing provider, you want to sell to healthcare companies, you need to be HIPAA compliant.
That's right.
Or high trust certified.
Exactly.
Or any one of those, right? And that's an investment. And the way I look at it is there's a certain investment to get you to the point where you're at that level, where you've met the compliance needs in the program. You've built out the program, you've built out the infrastructure, just like any investment.
That's right.
But then there's ongoing maintenance as well. Those things are obviously critical. You can't just do it one time, check the box, and move on. There's the ongoing maintenance piece of that would be the more of the traditional expense part as opposed to the upfront investment.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit more practically speaking, what an organization, they do view it as an investment, all right? However great or ever small, if they view it as an investment, how does that manifest itself when we're talking about compliance and certifications and things of that sort?
Sure. It's one thing, we have a lot of services, as you know.
That's right.
And it's one thing when you've got a SOC 2 report for a SaaS provider that could be, something in the $40,000, $50,000 range from an assessment perspective. That is not as big of an investment as, say, something like FedRAMP, which is a larger comprehensive program. But where you asked, to your point about asking about where this manifests, is we have conversations with clients, and we know it's not just about the fees to conduct an assessment. It's the infrastructure that they have to build up, the teams that they have to build up. So when you're talking about an example like FedRAMP in the federal space, a company has to take a step back and say, there needs to be a 7, if not 8-figure opportunity
That's
for
right.
me in the federal market in order to invest those types of resources to build out a federal compliant infrastructure.
That's right.
More so if you're even talking about defense and other things, right? So that's the types of things that they need to be thinking about, because even if you look at it back on the SOC 2 side, would you go through a SOC 2 report to satisfy a customer, one customer that was paying you $2,000 a year? No, you need the opportunity to be able to to justify that
And to grow through it.
To grow through it, certainly,
right.
to certainly and adapt through it. And I'm probably talking business and sales, maybe too much here. I mean, there's the whole intrinsic value of needing a security program in place, and the protections and the trust and the peace of mind that come along with that. But when you're looking at it, at least initially, and you need to get the buy-in from CFOs and so forth. Why do we need to spend this money? Every CFO asks the chief security, chief compliance officer, why do I need to spend this money? What is the ROI?
That's right.
And the security officers and the compliance professionals roll their eyes, but they need to have the conversation. Right?
That's right. So I guess the audience depends, right? So depending on who you are within the organization, it could look like nothing more than just an expense. And in certain respects, it could really look like an enabler for some growth opportunities and things of that sort.
That's right.
So joust with me for a moment here. Let's just say that I'm an organization and I really just need to get the transaction done so I can get a very specific or very particular opportunity, right? Is it fair for me to think of it in terms of an investment, or is there a place in the audit world for just organizations that just look at it as an expense? I hate to say it, but get the box checked and move on.
Whether it's appropriate or not is someone's opinion. Anyone's opinion, right? But it is reality. There are definitely companies that go through minimal levels of compliance just to meet minimal needs. And what works for their business works for their business. Our hope is that they're at least taking from that. I mean, things like a SOC 2 have basic components around risk management and governance that will improve a company. We know will improve a company. ISO 27001. We as auditors, we're generally agnostic when it comes to the standards, but I will always state that I think that some of the best run security programs in the world are ISO 27001 certified, because it requires focus on the security program. And and there's the benefits from that. And I think certain organizations get that. I think some will, if somebody starts just with a deal that they need to get, at least they're doing something, right? It's a starting point, and you can always build on that once there's additional need or additional markets or even just additional need or perceived value.
Yeah, and I think it sort of highlights their maturity over time, because even those smaller or perhaps organizations that are getting into a particular, whether it's SOC 2, whether it's a PCI assessment, if they're looking to get into a particular market, and they may see it as more transactional. I need to just, like you said, I need to participate, right? I need to get it. I need to get the deal. I think over time, as you're indicating here, they begin to see the value beyond just the compliance check mark, and really see how not only is it improving from a sales standpoint, but that whole risk management attitude, the overall security posture of the organization. So I think over time, even organizations that may in the short term view it as an expense, they begin to adopt all the benefits of an investment, whether or not they actually call it an investment. So
and I want to be fair to my friends. Like I live out in California, as you know, so we work with a lot of startup companies, and so in many cases, it does come transactional in nature for those first steps. I don't think for a second that the chief information officers, chief technology officers aren't worried about security.
That's right.
But if they have 25 people within the organization, they may not have a dedicated security or compliance function.
Absolutely.
And that's a growth opportunity. It's not that they're not worried. It's not that they don't read the news like everyone else to see that there's breaches, and they don't want to be that cover story. So they're definitely worried, but I think I said that the transactional approach is good when it gets your foot in the door.
That's right.
It gives you a starting point.
So. Oh, fair enough. Okay, so I want to pull on that thread a little bit more about the different audiences within the organization, how they view compliance, and what they can expect from seeking sort of this return on investment that we've been talking about. From a top line standpoint, what are perhaps the top one or two benefits or ways that this return could reveal itself to an organization?
Yeah, I mean, top one is typically often going to be sales, and actually good chief security and compliance officers will have good relationships with the sales team, because they'll for multiple reasons, one of which is the sales team creates the opportunities that drive the need for compliance and whatever budget they would need to invest in those. It's also a good, healthy relationship to be able to educate the sales team from an expectations perspective, because there can be mismatch. You want to make sure that the sales team is messaging the company's capabilities in the appropriate manner. So no, absolutely sales. We want to get sales or market opportunities, right? If you want to get, there's so many clients that reach out to us. Maybe they started in SOC, maybe they moved into ISO because they've got international clients. We want to enter the federal or the healthcare market. What do we need to do to get there, right? And so we just hired a head of sales in DC for federal, and he's 100% going to want to make sure we're FedRAMP, CMMC, DoD, all those acronyms, right? So that's the immediate top line piece that comes to it. I think the other thing we talk about market, we talk about play. I think that there are certain companies that do business based on trust, and they expect to see certain levels of compliance, certain levels and compliance and certifications from firms with good reputations and a history of quality. And doing work with other like companies. They don't want to pick up a piece of paper or a certificate or something, report, and have questions about. Have to go through the process of revalidating everything that's in that report because trust isn't there. So I think that's also sales related, but it's not just customers. It's your business partners. Your strategic partners, your joint ventures. All of those different parties kind of come into play.
Absolutely. We've been in this industry long enough. We've seen the horror stories. We know how much reputation matters. So that trust gap that you're describing is not only between B2B, one organization to potential prospective clients or other organizations, but also the assessor that they use. The reputation of that assessor, can actually, in many cases, be the thing that helps seal the deal.
That's right.
Talk to me now about maybe some of the bottom line considerations when we talk about investment. And you mentioned before about the personnel, the infrastructure, things of that sort.
You have to put resources, obviously, to maintain a security and compliance program, and so that's going to impact your bottom line from a cost perspective. I think that's a given, though. I think there's certain table stakes. If you make the right levels of investment, hopefully your maintenance is reasonable.
That's right.
And I think that's what we've seen from time and time again is the companies that make good investments in sound programs and infrastructures. They're able to maintain at a lower level. We've seen tech companies with huge compliance groups.
That's right.
And sadly, we saw quite a few of them over the last several weeks laying several of them off. And I question that tactic given what we're talking about today, especially with some of these super large companies that had those layoffs that rely on their assessments and their compliance. To participate in almost every market. Right? We're talking about companies that do that across the board. So I think there's the better the program, I think you can streamline those efforts, you can streamline those resources.
That's right.
I think that in terms of just going through an assessment itself, doing a compliance program in a coordinated manner, where you're not just doing piecemeal. I'm going to do SOC today and SOC 2 today with one company. I'm going to do ISO with another company. It's not even just a plug for us as a single company, but having a comprehensive compliance program, having a baseline set of controls that are deployed across the organization that can meet various different requirements is just going to make the burden on the organization lower. So that's the primary. That's your direct, compliance expense. The other category I always talk about is the what happens when it doesn't go well, right? If you have a report that is of questionable quality and you get pushback from a customer or challenged by a customer on your certification, on your report, and then you have to defend that takes time. Or if something was missed and you have to go and remediate and you have to redo an assessment, redo compliance, that takes time. I mean, we know that we're not the only companies as assessors, we're not the only companies that come in and poke at a particular client, right? Their customers are looking at our reports, they're asking, sometimes sending, hopefully not, but sometimes sending their own questionnaires, and wanting to dig in and do a little bit more. So at the point where you start to see inconsistencies and questions are raised, that's when the whole trust walls start to break down.
Absolutely. So. You've really highlighted the strategic attitude of compliance beyond just making sure that you've got the appropriate risk mitigation strategies in place, the appropriate safeguards and controls in place.
Yep.
You certainly need to do all that blocking and tackling.
Yep.
But there's an overall story and an endeavor that an organization has to really confront to say, hey, I've got a story to tell and it's worth telling.
That's right.
But how do you ensure that you select the right assessor,
Yep.
that you have the right scope? We also talked about various frameworks, so it suggests that there's a roadmap, right?
That's right.
So when we think about investment, it could be, maybe I start off with a SOC 1 or a SOC 2,
Yep.
and then it can progress to things that are more global if you have a more global footprint, or you want to appeal to a global market, maybe ISO begin to make sense. And depending if you're operating in the federal space, there are other things. I absolutely want to have you back because I'd like to talk to you about that strategy
Sure.
in particular, that
Some
roadmap.
of my most favorite conversations with clients are those.
Absolutely. Well, Doug, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you on our next installment of the Truth Series.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, that'll do it for this installment of the Truth Series, where we strive to provide simple answers to complex questions. If you have any questions about anything you heard today, or if you would like more information on this question of return on investment, contact us on our website.